make it out to be when we first start examining healthcare reform. There's a problem, all right, but it's not the simple thing we look at. Now, when I hear about a single-payer system, I have mentioned before, I think back to those bad times I had in Scotland dealing with the single-payer system. But then again, Deborah, my wonderful wife, reminds me about the problems I had here in the United States. She reminds me that, yes, there are two systems going on here, and one of them may be what's the cause of the problem. The two systems are fee-for-service. That's where the doctor performs some service for you, some procedure for you, some operation for you, gives you a particular test for your problem. And then there is the HMO, commonly called managed care. Something's to matter with because we're heavily into this fee-for-service. Now, in order to study this problem, one of my good Toastmaster friends sent me an extensive article they would call Costlier Care is Often Worse Care by Atul Gawande. And this gentleman had some excellent facts which I immediately snatched up on. He discovered that some of the lowest costs in the nation are exactly where you wouldn't expect. Namely, the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, New York. And some of the most expensive health costs in the nation are right here in River City. To be exact, McAllen, Texas, where there's now $15,000 being spent per year on each Medicare enrollee. Where in Rochester, Minnesota, there's only $6,688 being spent per person needing health care. What is this massive difference? In El Paso, they're spending $7,000. That's a little better. But what is this going on in McAllen? Well, first of all, I'd ask myself, do they have better care? And the answer there is no. I mean, they have good care, but not quite like Rochester, Minnesota. And the difference I discovered after reading this article is how the doctors are paid. When the doctor in McAllen, Texas, wants to get paid, he's paid per procedure. And again, you must give the poor doctor a little slack here. We can't say doctors are the whole part of this problem. Because let's say this lady comes in and she has a pain in her leg. So the doctor flips to his Medicare book and he studies what he should be doing about this. He tells him, you should be running this test to ensure that she doesn't have this problem. And it names the problem with a name I couldn't pronounce. And the doctor says, you know, the chance of that happening is less than 1%. Nah, I don't think so. And then he remembers, oh, wait a minute. My buddy down the other block there got sued last year because some woman came up with one of these weird problems, and then they took him to task and took him a bunch of money from him, sued him because he didn't do due diligence and perform the proper test. I guess I better perform this test on this woman. So he performs a test for which he's paid by the insurance company of the lady what they offer for this test. Now, that sounds okay on the surface, but when you study it, you'll find out that there are people cherry-picking the system, doctors who will favor patients who have coverage that provides more money for that particular test than others. So there's a profit thing going on here. That's bad. That's not what happens in Rochester, Minnesota. Very interesting what happens there. In Rochester, Minnesota, doctors are paid the same amount of money for each procedure. So maybe that's the answer I said. Let's modify this fee for service. No, it's not that simple. Now, our president has a noble goal. He wants to take care of the uninsured people. And you'll find that the uninsured people are about 46 million, and that number varies depending on who you listen to, but it's 16% of the people are uninsured. He wants to take care of them. It's going to be tremendously costly to do that, however. It might cost $1.6 trillion over 10 years. He's got to raise that money. Currently, Democrats are figuring out, well, we could put a tax on soft drinks, we could put a tax on consumption, and then they started looking here at medicine, and they said, oh, Medicaid, Medicare. Yeah, we could lower the amount of money we pay to doctors for each procedure. That would help. Well, in truth, it would, but you got to look where the money is, the Willie Sutton approach. Where's the money? The money here is in employee-sponsored health insurance. 59% of Americans have employee-sponsored health insurance. It means the employee gives you some money for health insurance. So they're using the Willie Sutton approach. They're going where the money is. They're going to be taxing this big piece of the pie right here. And they'll also tax the Medicare and Medicaid, but they won't get as much money. So that's a problem. So what I thought was a simple problem to start with, it's just these socialists, they want to take over, you know, and they won the election, so they're going to win. That's not it at all. We're not talking socialism here. Remember, socialism is General Motors, where the government owns 75% of it, or AIG, where they own 80% of it, or even Fannie and Freddie Mac, the mortgage provider, where they own 80% of it. That's socialism. This is not socialism. The government doesn't want to own things. It wants to control things. So I wouldn't call it socialism. That kind of fires up everybody, and besides, it's not what's going on. So I think we need to look at how are our doctors paid, and we need to study carefully how to pay them. Unfortunately, I'm not real convinced that Congress is going to do that this year. But I will surely, when I figure out all this stuff I've been researching, I will surely write my congressman and suggest a few things to him, which you'll probably do. Mr. Toastmaster.